Hello and welcome back to Karborundum Quest. Now, finally, we are actually going to start dealing with Karborundum. We have had our harvester in orbit, and it's coming back to the planet as we speak. We've also sent out a refueling thing because it doesn't have enough fuel to slow down at the moment. So what we're basically going to be doing today is trying to retrieve some Karborundum and hopefully not killing too many Kerbals in the process. The problems with this is everybody knows that's used this stuff, and for anybody that doesn't know, Karborundum is insanely heavy in the game. One container of it weighs a couple of thousand kilograms, maybe hundreds of thousands, but as I say, it's ridiculously heavy. That's what this little plane comes from, because I was testing different stuff, and I thought I'd put that in because it was interesting. So, people that have been watching before, here is the refueler that we used to refuel one of our other spaceships. With the last of the fuel that's in it, I've managed to get it into an orbit that intersects the Karborundum harvester that's coming back in. I've called it the solar eclipse. And I just managed to have a good sort of slingshot to get this in and get it caught up to the Karborundum harvester. It was ridiculously difficult, but here we are, just transferring across some fuel. And it took quite a while, and in the end I decided to just abandon this ship. So I transferred Yeb across, so that I've got good old Jebediah, and the original crew of the Solar Harvester all on board. And I'm just leaving the other spaceship. There's nothing I can do with it. I decided I needed as much fuel as possible. It was a bit of a waste of some oxidizer, but there we go. So as you can see here, I've turned on all of the generators just so that I can get all the engines going. I have 4 generators as a bit of redundancy. It is way more than it needs, but it helps with startup procedure. And then turning them off again, and just getting us towards our bun. As you can see down at the bottom, it is a ridiculously long burn. Even with time warp, this took a couple of hours. As you can see, everything's heating up at the back end, and I was starting to worry about the heat. I know that these engines produce a lot of heat, but I thought I accounted for that with the amount of radiators that are on this. As you can see, lovely and red and glowing, those cryo tanks glowing ridiculously warm, and then it explodes. Now, luckily for whatever reason has happened, the 4 outside tanks exploded and it left the central engine, which is brilliant. I don't know why that happened, but the way that I had the fuel set up, all of the fuel had drained from those back tanks. So although I've lost a chunk of mass in 4 engines out of 5, I still have the majority of the fuel. So, and it's still, although I don't have the thrust, I've still got technically the same ISP, I don't know, the same efficiency. It just takes a lot longer for a burn. So this is what I'm worrying about at the moment. And what I'm trying to do, what you can see me doing here, is trying to decouple the crew modules, literally to shift as much weight as possible. I want to keep in that main satellite module you can see, and obviously the recovery module, because push comes to shove, I want to be able to recover people. But yeah, so away with those modules, had to destroy them because there was nothing else I could do. And they're just keeping an eye on the fuel. A little bit later, once all the fuel's drained out, it's time for another pause, which also helps the engine cool down because it's burning for so long. And a little bit of destruction is required. So there we go, just destroying things, just to give me that little bit of extra delta V. I don't need this anymore, and seeing as most of the engines have exploded, I'm not going to use this ship again. It's a lot of money going up in smoke. But these things happen. So now we've shed the excess weight. What I have actually noticed, once I reduced the reactor, with that single engine running, I managed to have the radiators that I had left could cope with that single engine running. And it was working at, I believe it was 99.73%. So I would literally had the exact amount for what I needed if I put the main reactor down to absolute bare minimum. And as you can see here, I managed to get it into an orbit. I don't manage to circularize it. There are several burns that I do low to carbon to try and pull it back in as best as possible. Obviously this takes time. I believe in total there was 16 orbits after I had managed to get the orbit within the sphere of influence. There was 16 separate orbital burns to try and bring it down. And then eventually we run out of fuel. Luckily I'm close enough. And for some weird reason the mod got changed and you need water. I don't know why, but you need water to run with the fusion pellets, so I couldn't use the fusion pellets I had as an extra fuel. So anybody that's seen a previous video will recognise my heavy loader for throwing things up to the space station. So this is our first attempt at recovering some Karborundum from this ship. I've managed to land one single Karborundum probe before, which was its own encased probe, and had, I believe, about 45 parachutes on it to try and slow it down because of how heavy it was. And my idea is to try and use SSTOs, partly because they're cheaper, but also because I wouldn't have to use any parachutes. I don't quite like relying on them. I like the ability to glide in, and I figured this plane should have enough ability to bring it back down. So here we go, loading the Karborundum in. As you can see with the amount of reaction wheels, the size of my actual tug to get stuff across there. I've sort of managed for the fact that this stuff is heavy, but this is the first time I've ever tried to land a container of it in an SSTO. So here we go, standard re-entry. And then this is where I notice a problem. As you can see, I'm pulling back as hard as it can go, and I'm not getting anything. And I've still got that problem with the front gear that I haven't fixed since the last time I used this. But I cannot get it to pull up. And unfortunately, we lose a Kerbal. This is not good. So that's a Kerbal gone and an entire container of Karborundum. So it is time for a different SSTO. People that have seen my stuff will recognise this as my equivalent to the Mass Effect ship, which turns out to be a surprisingly good ship. Now, because of how heavy this stuff is, and I don't quite have the wing mass right, it's ridiculously heavy, I decided to use the VTOL engines. And it went wrong. So my second try, this isn't a repeat, this is a second crew. My second try, as you can see, I broke it. Now I did actually lose the Karborundum, it blew up inside the tank, so I didn't get anything from that. So this is my third time with using the same plane, but a separate crew. This isn't, I haven't redone anything, I haven't quick saved, although I believe it is the same crew that I'm using because they were just the first of the roster once I recovered it. Here we go, a bit more control. I'm showing you this on real time. And the splashdown, an actual splashdown of a Karborundum recovery plane. And there we go, we have an actual container of Karborundum, the holy liquid. And as you can see, 19 million worth recovered from that. So this is the next plane, yet another try, and this time I try and land it on hard surface. I was deliberately aiming for the ocean before because I wanted that extra leeway. And again, I'm using the VTOL engines to try and bring it down. I lose the backside of the plane, and I have some problems slowing down. The braking distance is ridiculous on this. But there we go, we've broken and we've stopped. And we recover, and this time, because it landed closer to the KSE, we have 27 million from that container of Karborundum. 27 million worth of Karborundum. So this is where I changed the design slightly and I incorporate a bit of infernal robotics, basically so that I can shove the container further back to try and... It's still going to be nose heavy, but to try and get it as close to the back end. I didn't want to change this plane too much because it's quite successful, but I wanted a little bit of an advantage, and it also makes loading it a lot easier. So after some very gentle work using infernal robotics, as you can see how much of a problem it is, I didn't want to snap any joints, so I was trying to be very delicate. And I managed to bring this back in, get it into the cargo bay nice and slowly. And then my second little trick that I installed just for this was the laser strut system, quantum struts. I've never used them before. This is the first time I've used them. I've got to say, after using them once, I am a huge fan of them. So, trying to push it back. Everything's good. Turn on the quantum struts and lock it in place. There's two on the side as well, not just the two you see on the docking port. Back into the atmosphere. And this time I'm trying to be posh because it's close to the end of the video. So you want to give it a shot and just try it. Try to do it right, just once. So here we go, coming down for the runway. Trying to be a show off. I managed to get towards the runway after pumping all of the fuel that's left in this to the bank. And what I did as a mistake was I dropped the oxidizer. That's why I'm actually doing a roll on landing as opposed to using the VTOL rockets, because I dumped the oxidizer and then realised how stupid that was. But this shows you I've landed with the brakes on, and then I've noticed that it's quite slidey when I tried to turn, so I figured I'd try and do a handbrake turn and turn on the engines so I don't fly off the end of the runway. And there we go, we managed to land on the actual runway with a container of Karborundum, even landing like a plane without bottom rockets. So, after that little bit of trial and error, how much have we managed? 79 million Kerbal pounds, Kerbal dollars, or kuros as I like to call them. So, that's what's going to happen now. We've got to recover the rest of it. I don't think I'm going to film it. So far this has been 10 hours on this video alone. So I hope to see you next time once we have some money and we start building some wild stuff. Please like and subscribe if you like this. It's nice to know that people actually watch it and enjoy it. And if not, don't be mean in the comments. Thank you. I'll see you again.